Welcome, everybody. Thank you to everyone who's coming. We're very excited to have Dr. Barbara Williams-Skinner here with Rabbi Shmuly Yanklowitz. And in this session, we'll be discussing civic engagement and the power of using our voices in the democratic process. And we'll discuss how each and every one of us can actively contribute to safeguarding democracy. So, Rabbi Shmuly, activist, educator, we're very lucky to have you here. And Dr. Barbara Williams-Skinner.
Hello.
She is the CEO and co-founder of Skinner Leadership Institute, which is she's a trusted advisor, public policy strategist, faith and community leader, author, lecturer, educator, and executive coach and mentor. She has made an indelible imprint in American public policy, government, diversity, and community relations. She and her late husband, Tom Skinner, founded the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation prayer breakfast that annually attracted over 3,000 leaders across the nation. She regularly works with interfaith leaders on issues like healthcare, criminal justice reform, and voting rights. Widely known as a committed prayer warrior, Dr. Williams-Skinner regularly prays for and with congressional leaders from both political parties and sends daily scripture to many of them. She is co-founder of a Millennial and Generation X leadership program, the Master's Series for Distinguished Leaders, that equips young leaders to move to the next levels of their lives and careers, while also addressing the needs of the disadvantaged in their community and modeling high moral character. Dr. Williams also co-founded the Master's Series for Distinguished Clergy that equips pastors with advocacy and media skills to voice their values in the public arena. She has authored a book on building personal spiritual power, I Prayed, Now What? My Journey from No Faith to Deep Faith, and a companion discussion guide, ideally suited for individual and group Bible studies. She's also the author of Leadership Led by God, Prayer Journal, and Guide, a book that equips leaders to operate daily in the spirit and character of Jesus. In 2022, Dr. Williams Skinner coordinated a 10-state nonpartisan, multiracial, interfaith, and multi-generation Faiths United to Save Democracy voter justice campaign with a toolkit to make voting easier for vulnerable populations. She is co-convener of the National African American Clergy Network and a recipient of various awards, including the DC Regional Leadership Hall of Fame Award. Dr. Williams-Skinner holds a BA degree from San Francisco State University, a Master of Social Work degree, and a law degree from UCLA, as well as a Master of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry from Howard University School of Divinity in Washington, D.C. We are so lucky to have you here, Dr. Williams-Skinner, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Rabbi Shmuly, first question for you. How does your faith tradition inform and emphasize the importance of preserving democracy?
Well, thank you so much, Isaac, for all your work and organizing this, and for all those who are listening to the podcast from afar or on the live stream or here in the Zoom, wherever you are. We're happy to be with you. I'm delighted to be back with Dr. Barbara Williams-Skinner, who I've admired for a long time as a great partner and a warrior for justice and bridge builder. And I really appreciate the importance of this topic today and our role at a time when things are so fragile in the universe. There is so much at stake at moments like this for the stability of the country and planet. And to start on this question of the faith tradition, speaking from the Jewish perspective, I would say a few things on the value of democracy. Firstly, the most obvious bit is that the notion of Tselem Elohim, the notion that all humans are created in the image of God, means that every individual has infinite value and infinite worth, that every vote matters. In fact, the Torah consistently wants to count every vote, take a census. It wants to count each person. Each person matters. The second, Professor Michael Walzer from Princeton University talked about how actually the biblical monarchy model, although it sounds like a very different model than democracy, actually set the stage for later democracy. And he points to three profound ways. I won't go into all of his arguments now about how the Jewish monarchy system from the Bible, from the Torah, actually sets that stage. But things like the checks and balances between the Melech and the Sanhedrin, the king and the courts, things like the accountability for the king, right? Things that involve transition of power and accountability for how power is used. Another point I would share is that, prior to Har Sinai, the Ten Commandments, Mount Sinai, we have what's called the Noahide laws. And one of the 7 Noahide laws is that we should have just courts. And that sounds like one of the 7, but the rabbis actually extend that one into hundreds. The notion that all human beings should uphold just courts is actually, it contains hundreds of layers of commitments to justice within that we're ultimately supporting a system that treats all people fairly and equally and upholds the health of our system. The last thing I'll say for the moment is that there's a breakdown in America of trust. Trust of media, trust of elections, in certain segments of America, of course, trust of medical experts, trust of clergy. There is a breakdown of trust of expertise, around democracy and media and medical, of any type of expertise, really, and of each other, given that we live in echo chambers. And I think that fundamental to Jewish ethics is bitachon, is a notion of trust. That trust is a value to uphold, that we can rebuild trust in truth. We can rebuild trust in the processes of election we have in place in this country, which are very strong. Not to mention trust in judges, trust in the judicial branch. And I think that preserving democracy, a big part of that is rebuilding trust. Lots more to say, but I'm going to pause here for Dr. Williams-Skinner to engage with your question.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I am a follower of Jesus, and I am so happy always to be with sisters and brothers of different faiths, because I think we have more in common than we have differences. I think and I agree with you, Rabbi, that the Genesis 1 text on the image of God, the Imago Dei, is really the root beginning of how you value the life, the dignity, and the worth of every person, every single person, without exception. My faith tradition teaches me that you can't even love yourself without loving your neighbor. You can't love your neighbor without loving yourself, and you can't do that without loving God. It all ties together. And loving is not a euphoric notion. This is about really looking out for the one who can't look out for themselves. It's about serving. It's about the Matthew 25 tradition of the least of these. It is really the 2,000 plus verses of scripture from Genesis to Revelation on God's preferential concern for the homeless, the vulnerable, the stranger at the door, the orphan, the widow. And it's also tied to the whole concept of righteousness. And that righteousness is really defined as what is just and right before God in the courts. And Isaiah says that in Isaiah 10. He says, woe to you, unjust rulers. In other words, God is watching you. So I think their faith tradition teaches us in many ways, our nation is as strong as we care for the weakest, bottom line. And that's borne out in a democracy that has not always done that. That has not always been fair in the courts to those who are poor, those who are people of color, those who are outsiders. We've not always had a justice system that has cared that there's anti-Semitism on the rise, even though the numbers bear that out. So I think that it's hard to say you are a person of faith without being very concerned about how that looks for every citizen at the polling site. And there's nothing more endemic to the concept of democracy than being able to vote your values, the kind of leaders that you want in a free, fair, and safe election. So it's all tied together in every way to me. And it's what moves me. It's why I do this work at Faith United to save democracy. It's why we connect with our Jewish and our Muslim and our Christian leaders like Rabbi Yanklowitz, who we have been working for a time in Arizona because we share this belief that God is watching, and we should really be very careful about the fact that if one of us is hurting, then the idea of righteousness is that everybody is hurting. Okay, it's if you're not okay, I'm not okay. All right. So I think that's really the thing that ties that binds us, and I'm so grateful to be able to be with brothers and sisters who are pushing that. That's not what our nation pushes. That is not the ethos of America, but it is why we have to stand in the gap together and shine a light in a dark place, shine the light in chaos. There's much chaos in this country. People believe that Jews and Christians and Muslims cannot work together. If we don't work together, none of us are going to make it. That's what I believe.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful answer, Dr. Williams-Skinner. That's fantastic. And now we'll stick with you for the next question. Which aspects of democracy do you believe are most vulnerable or at risk right now?
I think there's so many. The concept right now, the thing that led Faith United to Save Democracy, the organization that I coordinate to come into being, is that in 2018, I was heading an organization called the National African American Clergy Network, and we were only focused on the Black vote because that's where the most voter suppression was targeted at the time. We've always had Jewish allies, but the targeting from the 1960s has been against the Black vote, the poll tax, and all of those issues that we had to fight through. But in 2021, after the 2020 election and the denial of that election, the January 6th, the insurrection at the Capitol, you had 400 anti-voting laws from 49 states, and 33 of them were passed in 19 states, including criminalizing giving food and water. I mean, we could not even obey our faith tradition, and we would be arrested for doing that. But that's what's on the books right now in many states. And so myself and Reverend Jim Wallace and others said, you know what? We can't do this just with Black folks. This is affecting everybody. Every Jewish elder who doesn't have a wheelchair at the polling site, every Muslim person who goes and is turned away, every Black person who is turned away. That's all of us. And so we started Faith United to Save Democracy. And why are we concerned? Number one, you have partisan elected officials right now refusing to certify, telling us right now, 9 weeks before the election, that they will not certify the election, even after the vote is counted, even if it's clear that it's not 10,000, 11,800, as it was in Georgia, but whatever the number is, that is really a threat. That's a big threat. And the reason it's a big threat is because that's a large number of states. The second is political violence. You know, in 2020, Time Magazine reported that about, I think 12% of Americans said maybe, political violence was conceivable in their mind to save the democracy. That number has gone up to 25% today. That's like 1 out of 4 people are saying it's okay to try to take somebody out if my candidate does not get elected. That is really extremely dangerous. I think the third thing is the reluctance of young people to vote. And we're having a major problem with young Black voters. It is about the Gaza issue. It is about us helping them to understand that you have to be fair-minded about how our Jewish people and our Jewish friends are being impacted, and you have to have that same compassion for the Palestinians. You can't do it. You can't have compassion on one side and not the other. We're having a hard time right now. We're calling out our entertainers and our athletes and others to kind of have sessions with our young leaders because they are overwhelmingly much larger than the baby boomers in my generation. They're twice the number. And so we can't just, wave them off. But that is a big issue. that issue and people's feeling that in 2020 they voted after the George Floyd killing, but they got nothing for their vote. That's a voter education issue. They got a lot, but it's still a lot of education. I think that's a problem because when young people check out, when people check out of democracy, we don't have one. Because democracy is upheld by the right of the activity of citizens. I think that's another big issue. And I think those three, for me, are ones that we have to be concerned about. We have to be concerned about another January 6th. We have to be concerned about a Supreme Court that no longer believes that it has to rule in righteousness. Those things do concern me deeply, and they will affect our democracy. I will leave it at that.
Rabbi Shmuly, on to you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams-Skinner. That was very informative and excuse me, and helpful. And I share those concerns. And I'll just name a few, some overlapping and some slightly different. The first is, trust in counting of votes, as simple as it is. I recently was in the Maricopa County Recorder's Office taking a tour with Stephen Richer, who unfortunately has been unseated by an election denier. And I'm actually going to put an article in the chat here. And Isaac, if you wouldn't mind kindly putting it into the live stream, that'd be great. On an article I wrote about that, on why everyone should take a tour to better understand how the content process works to reduce election denial. So that's the first, is to build awareness and trust in the processes we have in place. The second is the large and wide misspread of information. Misinformation all over the place is at a toxic level I've never seen before, where people have no clue what's true anymore. And I think that's part of what is leading to a certain cynicism. Dr. Williams-Skinner touched upon young people and some of that cynicism. And I think some of it is actually informed by the fact that people actually feel like they don't know what's going on. They can't even get access to what's really going on. And I think that misinformation campaign is a really big issue. By the way, I hope we will hear, I see my dear friend and colleague, Pastor Warren Stort just joined as well here. And I hope that we'll hear from him at some point. I didn't know he was joining.
Absolutely, yeah.
I hope we'll hear from him today as well. The next is just voter intimidation, as you talked about with the political violence and people who are truly afraid to show up. The intimidation, whether it's from people who are working there or volunteering there, or people just showing up with a big truck and a big flag, and in some places even, with weapons, and that intimidation is very serious, and something that we need people. I know we're going to get to what to do. We need people volunteering on election day to be out there and bringing awareness to this and making sure it's all safe. Tangentially, I do want to raise my own voice of conscience for DC statehood. DC statehood is achievable, that people like Dr. Williams-Skinner who live in DC, who I think it's undemocratic that DC is not represented. I think this is a democratic issue that we could get with the majority of senators, if the filibuster returns to a sane place. Future U.S. Senator Ruben Gallego out here is very much in favor of that and has been leading the way on that pathway. And we do have to get Senator Kelly on board because he's been holding out DC statehood. Another Arizona issue is Prop 137 as it relates to judges. A lot of Arizona voters aren't aware of Prop 137 and what some very extreme judges that some on the far right want to ensure never get off this court. So people have to be aware of Prop 137 in Arizona. The last thing I'd say for the moment on the voter suppression issue is just that poverty is a threat to democracy. People living in deep poverty as an economic justice issue, people living with deep vulnerabilities who can't get the medical care they need, who can't get the transportation they need, who can't get off of working 3 jobs So they can't even find time to vote, not to mention find the time to learn and get involved. So it's a racial issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's an economic justice issue, and it's so systemic to what's happening in the country. So yes, it's the insurrection and the election deniers, it's the misinformation campaigns, it's the voter intimidation, it's the voter suppression, it's the issue of DC statehood, it's what's happening in the judicial branch. And as Dr. Williams-Skinner said, it's the toxic cynicism that's emerging that we can't make a difference. And I think if our faith traditions do anything, it is to remind us that we are here on the earth to make a difference, that our faith gives us hope for what we can build together. We never throw in the towel as people of faith, as people who believe in the power of transforming our society. Let me pause there.
Yeah, let me just add, thank you for those. You're absolutely correct. I would add that the Brennan Center for Justice reports that there are over 10 states now that have by law, the capacity for legislative takeover of the election process after people have voted. I think that is really a real threat to democracy. And one I forgot, which I've been studying a bit, is the inability of people who paid their debt to society to vote. To me, if you can have a convicted felon voting and running for office, I'm just saying that's a fact. That's, I'm nonpartisan, but that's a fact. Okay. Then I don't understand why we have people who paid their debt to society. They paid their fees. They are people working, they're running their lives. All of a sudden they lose their citizenship rights forever. There's something wrong with that picture. And I think that's something that we should talk about when we talk about strengthening democracy.
I very much agree with that, Dr. Williams-Skinner and Rabbi Shmuly. We appreciate you bringing light to Prop 137 and to DC statehood. But now back to you, Dr. Williams-Skinner. We have another question of what practical steps can individuals take to actively participate in the upcoming election, both leading up to and on Election Day?
Well, thank you for that question. This is going to be a very, very close election. If you see right now at the 2 to 4 point margin of victory on either side, turnout is going to be absolutely crucial. So that means that the first thing everybody needs to do is go to vote.org and check your own registration status, because if you haven't voted in 2 elections, you could be purged. In many states, Georgia is purging like crazy right now. Other states are. So you want to make sure that you are fully registered. You don't want to go down to vote or however you're voting and they say you're not eligible to vote anymore. Okay, so that's number one. Don't assume that. Check that for everybody in your household, in your synagogue. You just check that, or your organization. That's one. Secondly, if you're in a state that has early voting and the dates for early voting are posted, and they are in about we're almost like a month away from the first one is October 4th, right? So we're a month away, almost exactly, from early voting, 30 days away. So you want to make sure that you have the early voting day. I want to encourage everybody to not wait to go on election day, because you can avoid all kinds of problems, as Rabbi was saying about the chaotic crises of people threatened, intimidated, or whatever. Much less likely you can ferret out all those problems in advance going early. The other thing you want to make sure you do is why go in at all? Why not get an absentee ballot in your state? And if you go on right now to turnoutsunday.com, that's our website, turnoutsunday.com. We have a nifty toolkit, and on page 7 has a 50-state map. If you just click on your state, it will tell you what your deadline is for registration for absentee ballot. And also you can change your status. If your address has changed, you've moved, you can change that as well right online. It takes you to your Secretary of State. So that's turnoutsunday.com on page 7, on slide 7, and you can know, in other words, get ready. The other thing you can do is in your groups right now, you can already download the ballot. why wait to find out? Maybe you already know. Maybe you're an adult and you know, and it's no big deal, but maybe young people who are voting for the first time don't have a clue about how to vote. They have 7 judges. You pick 2. Which 2? No, 5, whatever, school board members. So you have time now with your group with 9 weeks to go down the ballot. And how will these leaders, you can Google people and find out how they voted in the past, or press statements they made. You can go to their social media and find out if they're harmful to your community or not. That's what we're doing. We're saying you can be prepared in advance. The other thing you can do is with turnoutsunday.com, with Race United to Save Democracy. And we really need your help for this. And Rabbi, I can tell you, in Arizona, we need poll chaplain and peacekeepers. One of the reasons why, and I hope Warren Stewart gets a chance to come on this, because Pastor Stewart can tell you that the presence of poll chaplain and peacekeepers, people who've gone through the training, who are clear about how, with their voice, with their presence, with the tips and tools for nonviolence training, they have been able to neutralize bad actors. There's Dr. Stewart. So you want to sign up for at turnoutsunday.com. We have 3 more trainings left. We've done 7. We've done 4 of the 7. September the 9th, that's Monday, from 7 to 8:30, and you get how to be a poll chaplain. And then the peacekeeping tips is very interactive, very, very helpful. The 16th and at the 30th. So we have 3 more left. So you can actually sign up with a buddy. If you feel more comfortable taking somebody with you, you just give us their name. That would be the other thing. The other thing you can do, you can be a poll worker. The reason why these issues that Rabbi and I talked about happen is because you don't have enough people with good common sense, integrity, character in the places where they need to be, right? So if you have people who, right now you can get $200, I think, for sign up in most states to be a poll worker. And if you go to eac.gov, EAC, that's for the Election Assistance Commission.gov, and you can be a poll worker if you decide you don't want to be a poll chaplain, but you want to be an official inside. We need honest officials. We need people we can count on, so we need that. And then I want to say the last thing is make sure anyone in your household or in your organization with special needs, right, has transportation, because this is a big issue. This is a really big issue. So those are some of the things. And also talk to your young people in advance. Sometimes we've done mock situations where young people know, okay, when I walk in, what do I do? What will they ask me? What do I have to show? Don't pretend that everybody knows how to vote. If you have young people, help them know that this is their citizenship responsibility. It's a privilege in a democracy, but help them to know how to do it.
Amazing, amazing. I love that. So just a few points on this question as well. I think that what can we do? I think part of it is about Election Day, and part of it is about the culture we're building up to then. First thing I want to say is I think that as faith communities, we need a richer language than the current political discourse. Right. We need to be more than just a Democrat language and a Republican language. We need to we need to have a deep spiritual language, a religious language that helps to talk about these issues. And here, I think daily about this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I posted in the chat here. He says, the church must be reminded that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state, and never its tool. If the church does not recapture its prophetic zeal, it will become an irrelevant social club without moral or spiritual authority. And I love that. And I think that's the opportunity for us to go deeper than what Fox News and CNN wants to say, to go deeper than what the politicians want to say. That this is about something much, much more deeply rooted. And that's how we can tap into those younger people that Dr. Williams-Skinner was talking about, who are disillusioned. So that's the first thing. The second thing related to that is that no candidate is perfect. No party is perfect, right? They're not God. God is perfect. The heavens are perfect. Right here, it's a beautiful world, but it's a broken world. We need to help people understand you vote even when things aren't perfect for you. You vote and get involved even when you don't think every goal you want is going to be met. The next world is perfect. This world is broken, and yet we still have to do our part. So that's the second point I want to make. The third, picking up on what Dr. Williams-Skinner was saying, is giving rides to people, helping accessibility to the polls, engaging our family and friends. We all have family and friends who are not going to show up. We need to inspire them to show up. And then showing up at the polls. I have this clergy hat just because I'm afraid to wear my kippah there. But this clergy hat where we can be poll chaplains, we can be workers there. There's so much to do. But again, I think even more than just the practical logistics, it is right now inspiring people that it is not just a duty to being a citizen. It's a religious duty, a spiritual duty to show up.
Yeah, let me go back to that point, because I think that is the most important. When we said at the beginning that our faith tradition teaches us that everyone is created in the image of God and deserve the right to vote in free, fair, and safe election, it means everybody matters. Everybody's life matters. Everybody's well-being matters. And I think a lot of people are turned off because they don't think they matter anymore. And so I think that you're right, that the inspiration is not going to come from the candidates, although you do need good quality, high character, high integrity candidates, right? But we have to make sure people understand that there is a faith factor that's higher than the political factor in this election. And I think you get people more inspired by that than by talking about even the issues.
Thank you both for emphasizing the many things we could do on election day and leading up to it. So many important things, and we all gotta chip in. We got one last question for you, Dr. Williams-Skinner. How are minority communities engaging this election, and what barriers or injustices are they facing?
Well, people of color, which I like to say over the word minority, because in 10 years, there won't be one. 10 years, there will be no majority race. So we will all be majority. But people of color, I think, are, even notwithstanding what I said about the reluctance of young people, the passion around this election is really very high. I mean, you always have people who, have to be, told that they need to vote. But what I'm seeing now is high energy among Black people, among Hispanics, among Asians, among the diverse groups that I meet with. And one of the reasons is because they know that the same spirit that existed on January 6th, that grew out of questioning the legitimacy of votes in cities occupied by large numbers of people of color, exists with those who are trying to take back the White House. They know that there is a plan to deconstruct the entire civil and human rights apparatus that exists right now against things like hate crimes and that impact Jews and Muslims and Christians. And they know that the notion of all Americans being equal before God is not born and not accepted by everyone. And so for them, it's not a matter of this is the greatest election in it is like, this is an election that's going to determine the kind of country we're going to be for a long time. Not just for the next 4 years, but for a very long time. And so people are taking this quite seriously. This is about saving or deconstructing democracy. This is about the possibility that American democracy is past tense. This is about the fact that people who love talking about and admiring dictators could conceivably occupy the White House. So I don't think we have a moment to spare. This is not about people of color. This is everybody. Okay, everybody who loves justice and freedom has got to take this election seriously. Now, obviously, as Rabbi said earlier, with 46 million poor people in poverty, and then you have 130 million low-wage people in America, right, who are not necessarily in poverty, they're barely making it. they're going paycheck to paycheck. They will be the most affected. And so this country is as strong as its weakest link. And our weakest link right now is this fragile thing called democracy. And that's what people are concerned about going to the polls in the next 9 weeks.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Now, I want to pause here just for a moment. My dear friend and colleague, Reverend Dr. Warren Stewart Sr. is here, and we want to make sure to hear from him around issues of democracy and faith at large, as well as in the state of Arizona for those who are here to participate. Just, I won't give him the full intro he deserves, but just so you know who he is, I'm posting his bio here in the chat so you get a sense of things that he's been involved with. Most recently, we marched together with Reverend Barber when he was in town, and who was with him? Remind me. Oh yeah, yes, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Reverend Jesse Jackson, yeah.
Yeah. And that was for a particular economic justice issue back when Senator Sinema was in office. In any case, thank you, Reverend Stewart, for joining us as well. We'd love to hear if you're prepared to share a few words.
Thank you so much, my friend and my sister, two of my most favorite heroes and sheroes, respectively, Rabbi Shmuly and Dr. Williams-Skinner. When I saw your email, Rabbi Shmuly, I said, I got to get on. I'm in Baltimore attending the National Baptist Convention, USA Incorporated, and I just left listening to a great preacher because I wanted to be on and I wanted to join the rest of you and my brothers and sisters, all who are here, to hear what you have to say. I respect you both highly. The language I heard you talking about, other than Democrat, Republican, the language is about biblical justice.
Right.
For me, biblical justice, the way I interpret God's word, Old and New Testament, is right relationships with God, with oneself, and with all others. Right relationships with God, oneself, and all. That is the aim. And that's what we are about. And that's why I'm so happy to be here and support both of you in the endeavors you're doing, and know I'm praying for peace and justice for all of us. Thank you, Pat. That's it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do in the front lines.
Thank you so much, Reverend Stewart. Thank you, Dr. Williams-Skinner, and thank you, Rabbi Shmuly. Now we'd love to open it up for questions. And there's so much to learn from each of you guys, so really appreciate it. So if anybody has any questions, they can write in the chat. They can ask aloud.
And the live stream also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
I never hesitate being the first one to jump in. So a very basic question, Dr. Williams-Skinner. When you know somebody personally that is on the extreme opposite side of the fence as you are at the moment, there's so much that can be brought up. And there's so many people that say, you know what, that's almost a waste of time because they're stuck where they are stuck. How do you personally address that?
So first, thank you for that question. That's very powerful. First, you've got to humanize and get off the label. So once I demonize the category, let's say it's a Klans person or a Nazi, okay, person who espouses Nazi beliefs and ideas, or a person who's outright racist and they brag about it. I don't care. I have to humanize that person. I say to myself, they got a mother and a father, or they're loved by somebody. And I can't, first of all, I'm not called to judge them. I am called to educate. But I think you earn the right to educate when you build relationships. Now, I can remember a former Klansman who came to my church, and it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, okay, because my mother's from Louisiana, just the person being in the same sanctuary. I was like so upset about it. And then I was sitting there and listening to this man who gave up being a Klansman. And I thought, at one time he probably hated people who look like me, but some kind of way God got a hold of him. So maybe there's something about praying for people. Maybe there's something about believing that people can be better than they are. You all remember the story of Governor George Wallace. Now, I can't say just getting shot changed him, but the reality is that this man stood in the door in the 60s of the schoolhouse and said nobody Black would ever come in there. And then he ends up going to a Black church and apologizing. I think there's redemption in everybody. No, I think you have to make a distinction between someone attempting to harm you. You have a right to protect yourself versus somebody who has ideas that you absolutely abhor. You just know that this is ridiculous. You know that this is hateful. This doesn't make any sense. I do. And I encounter people like that every day, all day. People who want me dead, people who decide that I should go back to somewhere. Okay. And I'm also about to, and I say to them and to myself, well, you should do the same thing since nobody was here first except the Native American. But that aside, I just find myself not letting the person bring me to their level and trying to understand that God found me somewhere one day hateful. I hated white people at one time when I was in college at Berkeley, thinking that all white people were evil and, were against Black people. God had to do something in my heart. So I cannot sit here and say my first thing against this person is to try to shut them down and act like they don't exist and make sure that they go to another planet. I've got to engage people. I've got to find a way to get to know them. We have meetings now. I've had a series of meetings this year and last year with white Christian nationalists who I understand would like to do away with a lot of rights that I have, who call themselves followers of Jesus, but who do espouse some hateful beliefs. So I wanted to be in a meeting with them to try to understand how they could be followers of Jesus and espouse those views. And I was able, through friends, it was all about relationships. You have to start with the relationship. I understand that I don't have a right to change somebody's opinion just because I have an opinion. I have to find a way to be heard by them. And I found that way. And we're still meeting. It wasn't a good meeting to begin with. But I'm saying we cannot wish away everybody who stands on the other side of us. We have to stand in our faith tradition and say that God in us is greater than the evil standing against me, or the person standing against me, or the belief standing against me. Then I've got to lead. That's the last thing I will say. Leadership is moving people from one place to the other and getting them to like it, which means with my passion about issues, my beliefs, I can persuade a lot of people, but I can't do that if I decide that I'm too good to be in a room with them. I'm too good. They're so evil. They're not even worth my time. I can't. I'm not God. I can't do that. That's what I do.
Fantastic answer, Dr. Williams-Skinner. We really appreciate that, and we appreciate the great question. And I think if there's no more questions, we'll wrap up. But for now, thank you all so much for joining. Thank you to all who contributed. And if you want to stay in touch, you can email us at info@utsedec.org. And this recording will be on YouTube and it will be on Facebook. So yeah, feel free to watch there. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.